North Carolina is coming off a season in which they won the ACC regular season and grabbed a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So the question is, how can players make individual improvements to make this season even better?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Thursday, August 15th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shea, joined today by our good friend, Coach Bill Robinson, head coach of the Milligan University Buffaloes and a 2-decade veteran of the Carolina Basketball School. You're joining us at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We want to thank you for making us your first listen or watch of the day. And we want to say a special shout out to the everydayers that are here and all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord family. Welcome in. This episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Coming up on the show today, we have a fun listener question that's going to actually dictate the vast majority of the show because it lends itself to multiple answers. And so Coach and I are excited to dig in on that. And it's story time coming up at the end of the show with Coach Rob, as we typically do on his shows. So Coach, let's dive right into this thing because it's going to be a super fun conversation. This question comes from at UNC Minded on Discord. It's our buddy JC Fox, who we've actually, Coach and I have both individually met with. I had breakfast with him at a Bojangles, and Coach hung out with him at summer basketball camp this summer. So super fun. And UNC Minded says, what's something you'd like to see a player add to their game to really help the team this season? And Coach, before we answer, we want to give shout outs to UNC Minded, who gave us 3 examples. So let me just spout those off for us. He said, number 1, Seth Trimble. He'd like to see him add a kick out. JC says he currently either shoots a 3 or drives it all the way. He said he'd like to see Elliot Cadeau add a step back and Jay Wash improve on help D. He says he may not have the body to bang, but if he can learn to switch last minute and come over to help, he could get 3 blocks a game. Boy, I would take that in a big way. So, Coach, what we've done here is you and I have each come up with 2 answers. We'll give one now, one in segment 2, and then we've got a couple honorable mentions at the end right before story time. So, Coach, why don't you kick us off with your first answer?
Yeah, the biggest topic at camp this summer, when we're sitting around lunch and coach's party, things like that, is where does the leadership come from? And with Armando leaving, and it's got to be RJ. It's got to be RJ on the court, and it's got to be RJ off the court. And I'd love to see him really elevate his leadership skills, because I think that overall affects the team more positively or negatively than anything that we can talk about statistically. They need somebody on the court to look to. They look to him to make plays, but what happens the emotional part of it, somebody not necessarily to have to be a rah-rah guy, but somebody who can lift somebody up when something goes wrong and know that they're there. Somebody to drive them to go get a meal, or somebody to hang out with them in the dorm. And it's not I'm an All-American. Let's treat us like an All-American, and you never see him except at practice time. I would like to, and again, we're not going to know about it, but I'd like to see him really extend his leadership, be more available to those freshmen, and just spend more time with them off the court. I think that's going to help Carolina be better, especially come March and hopefully April.
Coach, as a head coach, when you have a player like RJ who needs to be a leader but isn't like by nature a vocal leader, who is somebody like RJ that's more of a leader by example, kind of like a Tyler Hansbrough would have been, for example. How would you go about encouraging him to utilize that? Like if you were talking to me one-on-one, you say, Isaac, I need more leadership out of you. How would that conversation go?
To me, it's about time. And housing is such a different thing at the Division I level. Most of our guys are all in the same dorms, or at least close by. But hey, man, you need to go take Drake out to lunch. You just need to go sit down with him. And it's not that you have to have an agenda, but just be available. What kind of questions does he want? And spend more one-on-one time. And hey, man, I got this class, or I've got this play, or what are we going to be doing in practice there? I got this thing, just something like that, where he can be a resource. It doesn't have to be a long agenda thing, but just being able to spend time with those young guys, because they look up to him. He's the All-American. And it, just like Hubert talked about, a conversation we had this summer, everybody just kind of, it was Michael Jordan. It wasn't the Michael Jordan, the GOAT, that we know him now, but he was the All-American, and guys looked up to him, and they wanted to spend time with him and just kind of have him pour life experiences on and off the court with them. And I think that would be my advice to those guys right now.
What's interesting to me about what you just said is it reigns eerily similar to how you told me just a couple weeks ago. I can't remember what show it was, but you were talking about that's what you try to do as you're investing in the young men on your team. And so what's interesting to me about that answer you just gave is you're essentially asking RJ to be an extension of the same way in which you try to build relational capital with the young men on your team. Is that an accurate way to look at that?
Yeah, he's going to be an extra coach on the floor because he's a fifth-year guy. He knows what they're trying to do. There's no doubt in his mind that what they're doing is the right stuff. So you expect him to be a leader on the court. He's got to be a coach off the court too, and really make sure that those guys are. And even, I mean, you can tell him as a coach to go to class. If RJ says, hey, man, you got to get to class, that's going to carry more weight. It doesn't sound like it should, but it really will. And that's the type of leadership I think we're looking for, and making sure that he's not just thinking about next year. He's thinking about a national championship.
All right, so Coach's answer of what's something you'd like to see a player add to their game to really help the team this season starts with RJ and leadership. Interestingly enough, my first answer is also RJ, but it's something more on the court than what Coach just talked about. Now, we know with RJ, there's so much he can already do that you really have to nitpick to look at how he can improve his game outside of growing 4 inches taller, which, good grief, he would have been out the door years ago if that were the case. Coach, we expect him to be one of the best players in the nation yet again. And because of that, he's going to be so high up on teams' scouting reports that he's got to find a way to stay ahead of the competition. And so for me, one of the ways he can do that is getting to the free throw line more often in his last year. What encourages me, Coach, I was looking at his numbers. His free throw attempts per game have gone up literally each of the previous 4 years, from 2.3 attempts a game to 3.2 to 3.8 to last year. It jumped all the way to 4.7. And so I'm encouraged by that. But I started to look at a couple of the other point guards that we've had through the years. And there were 2 in particular that stuck out to me that were up close to 6 free throw attempts per game, Coach. That was Ty Lawson's junior year, which is one of those otherworldly years, right? That was just an insane year of college basketball. And then Cole Anthony's lone year of college, he was at 5.8 free throw attempts per game. Now, you look at some of the others, Marcus Page, Ed Cota, Ray Felton. RJ last year was up above any single year that those guys had, but I would like to see RJ get up over 5 attempts a game this year, Coach, closer to 6 if possible, like Ty and Cole. And here's 2 other things with it. RJ is the best free throw shooter in UNC history, so let's benefit from that, right? Like, even if your free throw percentage goes slightly down, I'd like to see you get there more, because the added benefit is it gets other players in foul trouble. And in college, where you've only got 5, coaches are auto benching players with 2 fouls in the first half. And the other thing, Coach, and then I'll let you respond to all this, is that with how Carolina projects to play, like we've talked about, we expect the lane to be more open than ever, meaning that RJ is going to have more capability to get to the rim. Same with Elliot, same with all the other, Ian, man, I think Ian's going to live at the free throw line this year. So all of that to me says that RJ should be able to get his free throw attempts per game up over 5 this year. Coach, what do you think?
I think there's a couple different factors. One, he has to have the physical strength to be able to take that beating on every given night. And he's going to get the pulls and the tugs and the hugs, and he's going to have to fight through all that stuff physically. And that's, I think, a big the benefit of having Jonas as your strength coach. I mean, they've been focused on that all along. Because he shot 40% from 3, people are going to run him off the line. He's got to be able to make that good decision, to be out, ball fake, take it to the rim, and be able to finish. Also, winning games and having the ball in our guards' hands at the end of the game and getting fouled. He can end up with 2 or 4 free throws a game just by, late game situations where people are putting them on the line. So those are the type of things. If you're winning games, your point guards are going to shoot more free throws late. If you're a great 3-point shooter and running off the line, you got to make that decision and attack, and being physically ready to handle the beating he's going to get. And it's going to be bad this year. And that's one of the things, being physical with small guards is one of the ways you slow them down.
Right.
And he's ready for it mentally. He's as tough as anybody. But the physical stuff is what I'm most concerned about.
All right, we'll keep our eyes on that. Well, as I said, Coach and I have more choices, more picks for who can add to their game to help the team grow this year. We've each got a Jaylen that we've picked out. We're going to bring those answers to you in just a second. Right after I tell you about GameTime. Going to MLB games in the summer is one of my all-time favorite things to do, except not so much right now because the Braves are terrible. But the game, the food, everything that's part of the experience, man, I love it even when my team's not winning. I'm excited to make all new memories again this summer. And thankfully, when I do so, I don't have to sweat high-priced last-minute tickets. Why? Because GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. That makes getting tickets faster and easier. In fact, prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. We're talking baseball, but how about this? North Carolina kicks off their football season 2 weeks from tonight at Minnesota. But let's look ahead to the end of the season when Carolina hosts NC State on Saturday, November 30th. Tickets as low right now as $89. In fact, I found seats on the UNC sideline right behind the bench for under $200, man. Go get those right now before those prices skyrocket. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets on GameTime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Isaac Shade, Coach Bill Robinson with you today, and we're answering this great question from @UNC-Minded from our Discord, who said, what's something you'd like to see a player add to their game to really help the team this season? And by the way, we're giving our answers. We'd love to hear from you because there are a ton of players and we're not given a ton of answers. So I'm sure you have thoughts and ideas. Why don't you shoot those in the Discord? Would be a great conversation to have, or you could drop it in the YouTube comments down here. So Coach, you and I each gave an answer about RJ Davis in the last segment. Who is your next player and what is it you'd like them to add?
Yeah, the really cool thing about this summer was being able to sit with Coach Williams at the alumni versus team game. And the very first thing we talked about was Jalen Washington and how important his role is going to be this year. And obviously our guards, I think, are as good as anybody in the country. And who's going to step up as that big position? Everybody, I think, thinks it's got to be Jaylen Washington. His statistics last year, we know he can shoot it. We know he's skilled. But I'm just looking at some stats here. He had 3 steals for the whole year last year. He had 7 assists. In 311 minutes, had 7 assists. He's going to have to play in a way to make people better. Both ends, offensively, defensively. You want to see him be more active at the defensive end. You got to have more than 3 steals in a year. You have to have more than 7 assists. If you're catching the ball and be able to make decisions, it's not always just be able to catch and shoot. You've got to be able to make some other people better. So those are the 2 things. I need to see him be more active at both ends of the floor.
Yeah, what's really interesting, I'm looking at stats as you talk about it. His assists per 100 possessions, which basically is a tempo-free stat, he was the lowest on the team in terms of the regular rotation players at 1.3. His assist percentage, which is the advanced metric on it, was 4.3, meaning 4.3 of the possessions ended up with an assist from him. That also was the lowest on the team. And so, Coach, on that side of it, you're absolutely right. It's got to get better. You look at block percentage, you're talking about the other end of the court. One of the things I'm encouraged by is he had the second highest block percentage last year behind only James Okonkwo, but ahead of Armando Bacot, ahead of Jaylen Withers. And so, there is some potential there. But you talk about the steals too. And with those long gangly arms, you'd think you'd see more from him. How, Coach, do you go about coaching a big man with that kind of length to utilize those arms and positioning for steals?
Yeah, I think he's more focused on getting blocks, and that's probably what he's been taught. One of the best post players we had was not a great shot blocker, but when guys would attack the rim, he would stunt or fake and then he'd get back in the passing lanes, and most guys are anticipating a big guy trying to block a shot, so they attract the defense and make that extra pass. I would love to see him do more of that, where he can, block some shots, but then the next time that guy comes in, give a little stunt and get back a hand in the passing lane. He'll create more havoc that way. He'll either create a bad shot with the guy who's the ball handler who has it, or he'll get his hand on in a pass, get a tip, get a deflection, get a steal, and then all of a sudden we'll have a chance to run to the other end. So those are the type of things we talk about, not being consistent and always going for a block, but able to mix it up so that driver doesn't know exactly what you're going to do as a defender.
How can his early defense on that side, coach? We often talk about Leaky Black, for an example, of somebody that had blocks and steals, but he didn't rely on that, and that's why he didn't always get the defensive accolades he should. How could Wash use early positioning better in the post to help him out?
Yeah, I love the fronting the post, and I don't really want to get to the side. I like to see him do that more and use his length and help side the same way. Be in a position where they do try to make those post entry passes, that he's there either to tip it away if it's in a high pass, or being able to get there and be there early, but not allowing his guy to touch the ball. Just be more active, and not just that. Again, part of it's just not leaning on somebody to be in the passing lanes. And I really believe, and again, I don't have any personal information about this, but I really believe you're going to see Carolina get in the passing lanes and be more active 1 through 5. It can't be 4 guys doing it. It can't be 3 guys doing it. It's got to be 5 guys doing it. And I think we have the personnel to do that this year, and that will see his steals increase tremendously.
Yeah, to where he will not be tied with Paxton Wojcik as he was this year with 3 steals, or as you said earlier, 1 ahead of Creighton Lebo. Obviously, he can't be because neither of those guys are playing this year, but you get the point. Or as Coach Williams would say, only 3 ahead of Miss Wicked Wanda. And so there we go with that. Coach, my answer for the next player here to add something that will really help the team is the other Jaylen Withers, who we affectionately refer to as J-Wit. Similar to your RJ one, my thing with J-Wit is more not strictly statistically driven. It is experience, decision-making, and consistency. Let me just unpack quickly each of those 3, and then I'll get your response. In terms of experience, this is Jaylen Withers' 6th year in college. He was at Louisville 4 years, redshirted his first year, and then played the final 3. Along with RJ Davis, he is the only senior on this team. This is his 2nd year at UNC, and I think there's just I think back to Cam Johnson and how much of an impact he had in his 2nd year. Not that he was bad his first year. He was coming off an injury and wasn't fully ready to go. But man, the role he played that 2nd year just grew by leaps and bounds. And so as J-Wit is more experienced at Carolina, and as he's the most experienced player on this team in terms of years in college, there's a lot that he can bring on that end. In terms of decision-making, Coach, J-Wit had a 16.4% turnover rate last year. If you don't know what that means, just trust me in hearing me say that it ain't good. 16.4% was 4th worst on the team and 2nd worst among the regular rotation players. And so that's got to get better. In total last year had 21 assists and 25 turnovers. Coach, I just felt like there were so many times when J-Wit would have the ball in his hands and would start to dribble, and your head inside you're just screaming, no, don't do that, right? And so the decision-making is the second thing. And then thirdly, consistency. With J-Wit, when he was on last year, understood his role and leaned into it, I thought he operated really well. But when he wasn't, it wasn't as good. Let me just give you 2 kind of examples for that. There was a 6-game stretch where he played single-digit minutes in 5 of those games. That was January 30th to February 17th. In that stretch, Coach, he scored a grand total of 10 points. Remember, this is 6 games. 3 of those 6 games, he had a goose egg in the point total. A grand total of 7 rebounds in those 6 games, 1 assist, 2 blocks, thankfully just 1 turnover, but only 6 total field goal attempts, Coach, and those came in 2 games. You contrast that with 2 other stretches, one of which came just right before that. There was a 4-game stretch from January 13th to 22nd, which included the Louisville game, let's remember, when he had 39 points, averaging 9.75 per, 26 boards, 6.5 rebounds per game. He was 11 of 14 from 2. That's 78.6%. And he was 82% from the free throw line, 14 out of 17. In fact, he was attempting 4.25 free throws a game in that stretch when his season-long attempts per game was 1.6. And coach, maybe what's even more encouraging is the final 7 games of the season. So this is the regular season finale at Duke, the ACC tournament, and the NCAA tournament. He never played below double-digit minutes in those 7 games. He had 43 total rebounds, 6.1 per game, 40 total points, 5.7 per game, 7 assists, 7 turnovers, so you're dead even there. And he was 15 of 21 from 2. That's 71%. So, coach, over the final 7 games, Jay Witt averaged 6.1 rebounds and 5.7 points. That's what I'm looking for him to find in this second year as he has more consistency and brings the most experience on this team. Coach, what are your responses to all that?
Yeah, the first time I saw him practice, he just had a different athleticism, even than the greatest athletes that Carolina has. He was just unbelievable to watch, get up and down the floor, and his potential's there. And I think part of it's not criticism, I guess, but it's what we talk about coaches at Carolina camp, is he has those unbelievable plays where he looks like an all-star, he looks like an all-American, and then he disappears. And that's the consistency you're talking about. That's what I would like to see too. I don't necessarily want to see the highlight plays. Just give me a high level of play all the time, where we can just rely on that 10.8 rebounds. If he averages 10 and 8, we have a real chance of winning a national championship. I mean, we really do. But that's the kind of consistency we have to have on a regular basis. And we're not there every day to see it and try to figure out why. But I think that's what the coaching is all about. You got to figure out, how do we get him to play that consistent role every day?
I'm really curious to see how the lack of an Armando Bacot type player opens things up for him inside. I think that could play well to that athleticism you were just talking about.
No, I definitely believe that. And it's also the consistency with minutes. In some of those situations, if you get in there, don't make an impact immediately, you're not going to get that second, stint. You're just not going to get back in the game. With Armando being gone, now all of a sudden he has to go in that second time, even if he wasn't productive that first time, and maybe even the third time if he wasn't productive in that second stint. They're gonna have to keep going to him, and I think those consistent minutes allow him to be more productive, and then he's going to be more consistent over, hopefully over the whole period of the season.
All right, so that's the Jaylens and what we're looking for from them. Coach and I have a couple honorable mentions left, and we got to get to story time with Coach Rob. We'll do all that coming up in just a second. Coach, before we get to story time, I just wanted to see if you have any honorable mentions of things you would like to see a player grow in their game that would help this team overall.
Yeah, the big one for me is Zayden High. I thought Zayden had a great summer while we were there. Again, what we saw in a 10, 11-day period is not a whole lot, but he looked like a player who deserved time, deserved to be in the rotation. His stats last year were not great. Obviously, he averaged the least amount of points out of anybody on the team, and that's because he was playing more games than some of those, the Blue Steel guys that got in there late. But 3 assists, 9 turnovers, that kind of stuff, I think changes over consistent minutes. And his energy was great. I know he wants to play. He made a statement the other day of forcing the hand of the coaching staff to make him have to play because he's playing so well. And that's what I'm anticipating, that his size, his energy, his length, his ability just to change the game just by flying around the gym. And that's really all we need from him. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. Can he get consistent minutes? Can he stay away from a negative, 1 to 3 assist to turnover ratio? I think that's important too. But I think when he gets those consistent minutes, I think he'll see some real improvement.
I like it. Coach, my quick honorable mention is 2 things for Elliot Cadeau. Folks who are regulars on the show know that I harped on him quite a bit last year for his lack of using his left hand at the rim. Would have times when he would be on the left side of the rim, go up with his right and get blocked or deflected or something. And so there were times late in the season where it started to grow more, but that's something I'd like to see more from him this year's consistency with left hand use. And then the other, and this is hopefully just the natural progression of the guy that's got the ball in his hand the most, growing into a sophomore who's not, skipping a year of high school to come play, is just decreasing his turnover percentage. I talked about how Jalen Withers had the 4th worst turnover percentage on the team. Well, 3rd worst was Elliot Cadeau, with only James Okonkwo and Zayden High worst. Now, again, hear me recognizing that that's going to happen when you've got a freshman as the lead guard of the Tar Heels, right? And let's not forget all the assists that came with that. He did not have a negative assist to turnover ratio. It was positive, and so we're encouraged by that. But we hope that looks even better this year. So that's my honorable mention, is those 2 things for Elliot. Coach, anything else you would add, particularly on that turnover stuff with Elliot there?
No, I think it all just comes to consistency again. The more inexperience, the more time he has, the better decision making he'll make. I think we'll see his assists go up. I think we'll see his turnovers go down. And that's what mature players do. And I expect it to be pretty significant, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Again, 150 assists last year, 67 turnovers. So the assist to turnover ratio was good. Just want to see that turnover percentage go down. Now, where we typically turn with Coach in segment 3 is to story time. Coach, as I said earlier, is a 2-decade veteran of the Summer Carolina Basketball School. He has written, now I can say it in the past tense, a book about those 2 decades, all sorts of stories about it, and has now ordered his first 500 copies of it. We're waiting on those to come in. Several people have asked me, hey, how do I get a copy? Will Coach autograph it for me? All sorts of cool stuff. Coach is working on all of those logistics. And when we have an answer for that, man, we will let you all know, because I know you want to grab a copy. But Coach, want to ask you, as always, if you would share a story with us today.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a story about Dante Calabria. I used to think it was Calabria until I got to know him. He actually pronounces it Calabria.
I thought it was Calabria until literally this minute. So thank you.
I've embarrassed myself in front of him, before I learned exactly how he liked to have it pronounced. But he just got an opportunity to go to Italy to coach professionally, and left the high school he was coaching outside Pittsburgh, and reminded me of a story of one of the camp games. And I was not at the game, but it's a legendary story that is in the book. But he came back from playing over in Europe, back for the summer, and was just playing with the guys, and played the alumni game. And he had one of those days where he got in the zone, where he just didn't miss. And in those type of games, when you hit 2 or 3 threes, your teammates are going to keep giving you the ball. And they kept setting him screens, and he kept making shots. And he hit 5, then he hit 6, then he got into 7. And of course, they don't have stats for the game. But in Dante's own memory, he thinks he made 14 or 15 threes in a game that you only go to 70. And he said he could have thrown it in from half court, it still would have went in. I mean, he just got that hot. And the last play of the game, they set a double screen. He came off. He had 3 guys running at him, and he just kind of threw it up there. I don't even think he could see the rim, because he had guys, and it went in, and they ended up beating. And he thinks it was after a national championship. So it may have been, that 2005 team or something when he was still playing. But there's some really good players on the floor that he ended up beating that day. But again, 52, 54 points, something like that is what he thinks out of the 70 points his team scored. And his teammates just stopped shooting. They just kept getting him the ball. So it was one of those things where, he goes back to the cafeteria like we do to go eat, because he's just there. He's just, hanging out. And kids just swarmed him for autographs. They didn't know who he was, but they saw the unbelievable performance he had on the court, and they wanted to make sure he got his autograph. So that was one of those unbelievable Carolina stories that had nothing to do with the current player.
Man, that's a zone you can only dream about being in. It's kind of like Steph's shooting in the last couple minutes of the gold medal game. Back on the weekend there. That was something crazy impressive. Well, I'm glad to know that story about Dante, and I'm glad to know that his last name is Calabria. So there we go. Learn something new every day. Man, that's a great story, Coach. And what a moment that must have been for him to get swarmed. You love just moments like that. So thank you for sharing that one, as always.
If you go to IP3s there on Franklin Street, and the pizza place there at the top of the hill, they've got one of his jerseys in a picture box up on the wall. And the last time I was there, he was there. So it was kind of cool he was at the next table, and to see his jersey on the wall and just kind of be hanging. He's just a great guy. He's a great coach. So I'm very excited to see how this season goes with him over in Italy.
Another great story from Coach. If you want to read that story and others, make sure you get this book when it comes out. Very excited to get a copy in my own hands as well. Thanks so much for tuning in with us on today's show, folks. Again, we'd love to hear your answers to our mailbag question today. What player would you love to see add something to their game to really help this team this season? If you haven't subscribed to the show on video and audio, very simple to do, and will help you make sure you don't miss a second of Locked On Tar Heels. If you're not part of the Locked On Discord, Locked On Tar Heels Discord, we'd love to have you in there as well. It's free to join. The link for that's in the show notes. Come on in. Hop in with us. Let's have some great conversation. Want to remind you, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow to wrap up the week, but until then, peace.